What's up, folks? Welcome to the live stream. We've got my buddy Matt Bernardin here from SoCal Herps.
Hey, everyone.
We're working on a project right now, so I figured he could sit here with me. I gave him a choice to sit here with me or not. He chose to
leave.
He chose to leave, but I forced him to stay so that I could have somebody else to sit with me and do things.
Do things?
Yeah, come on, it's your turn. Your turn. Go.
I don't want to do anything. I just really wanted to be here and talk to Dillon. That's why we're here, right? If that's his real name, Dillon.
Yeah, I think this is his real name. We'll have to ask him.
We'll find out when he gets on.
We'll find out when he gets on. Thank you guys for being here. We know that you got all kinds of choices and things to do with your time, so we appreciate you guys coming here. Thank you to Chris for always being here and making sure you guys have a nice experience in the live chat. Hey, let's just kick this thing off. Should we just kick it off, Matt, or should I drag it on a little more?
I'm done listening to you talk. Let's talk to Dillon.
All right. You're watching Triple B TV. All right. Wait, where'd Dillon go?
We lost Dillon.
No, we didn't lose Dillon. He's right here.
I'm here.
There he is. There he is.
My name is actually Dillon, by the way. It's not a fake name. It's legit.
How do you say your last name?
I say Perron.
You say Perron.
You can. Some people say Perron. You could say Perron as well.
I was in my mind. I was saying Perron.
Yeah, well, it is French, so it's actually Perron. But I don't speak French, so if I say that in Canada, people are going to think I speak French. So I just avoid that at all costs.
I actually get the same thing too, because last name is Bernard, and that's French. And
we are the same.
We are. We're practically the same. Dillon, you're my brother.
Put the hat on backwards. And Dillon, why don't you give everybody a little, for people that don't know who you are already, a little spiel about what you are and who you do.
Sure. Well, my name is Dillon Perron. I run the YouTube channel and podcast called Animals at Home. It is mostly a podcast that I do spackle videos in there now and again, but it's not really my main focus. My focus is on the podcast, and the podcast is a reptile podcast, obviously, but it's mostly focused, I would say, more on the keeper rather than species. We don't specifically get into, specific species or things along those lines. We tend to focus on the keeper. What are some things that we can do better? How can we progress the hobby? And I think that somewhat differentiates it from the average reptile podcast. I love all reptile podcasts, but I want to take a different angle with it. And that's sort of the angle that I found. I'm a very, very inexperienced reptile keeper. And because of that, I thought it would be a lot better for me to have people on where I could pick their brain and my listeners could kind of follow along the progression journey. So that's sort of the genesis of the whole thing.
Well, you definitely would have had me fooled as far as being inexperienced. I caught I think it just popped up on suggestions one time on YouTube, and I clicked it, and you had excellent audio, which immediately I was like, oh, this sounds good. I want to listen. And then when I heard you talking, it didn't seem like you were inexperienced. And one of the first people I saw, who I know, Elijah, you had on, you guys talked about nitivirus. And that's how I met Elijah too, because I had a video about nitivirus at one point, and he reached out to me, and we talked about it. And so there was that video, and then the one that got me most recently, which is the one that sparked me to ask you to come on, which you got me with the clickbait too. Something like reticulated pythons should you keep, and it was like, no, you shouldn't. I was like, oh, why? I'm gonna click. I'm gonna find out what's going on here, and then I thought you did a fantastic job of explaining, and I love the system you'd come up with. If people haven't watched it, there's a link down in the description for anybody that hasn't seen what I'm talking about. Just go check out Dillon's channel. It's all down there, and check that episode out. You did a fantastic job of like breaking down the math of like the ratio of the snake to the enclosure, a corn snake versus a ball python versus a reticulated python. And not just that, but the way that you broke it down and didn't, you clearly were just trying to be like, this is the information, this is what I'm breaking down. I'm not trying to tell anybody this is how you should do it, or you weren't trying to be like, if you're not doing it this way, like you're horrible. Which is, if you want to get people to be better at something, you need to do it by example and in the way that you do and did, and not be trying to shame people and just try to educate as best as possible, which is what you did.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. And that's kind of how to touch on the inexperience, I have 6 reptiles behind me. These are the 6 reptiles that I've only ever kept. I've never even had a reptile die on me. And I've been keeping reptiles for, I guess, since 2007. So I've been in the hobby for a while, but I don't have this like super depth of experience that you see many people have. But as far as the communication goes, that particular video, I was just me sort of thinking of this, like, what are some things that we can do to, like I was saying, progress the hobby. And we do have schisms in the hobby of people that are, hardcore one way, hardcore the other way. And I think that is the worst thing for the hobby, because we all, at the end of the day, have this love and passion for the animals. And really, we probably have more in common than not. And it's important to sort of bridge those gaps. So as far as doing a video like that, I don't have a reticulated python. I don't have big snakes. I'm not going to go out and just, try to blaze people who do keep snakes that way. It was just sort of what I was thinking, and, trying to leave it open-ended for people. And there was some great discussion in the comments. It brought lots of, people in, and, it was a little bit of clickbait to get people there, but I try not to roast people unnecessarily.
Yeah, well, I appreciated it for sure, and that's what I mean is the way your approach was, because I think it's real easy for people to get defensive if you suggest even just suggest that there's possibly a better way to do it than they're currently doing, and not even say this is how you have to, and just even suggest it. And maybe there's some guilt there. I personally can say that I feel a little bit of guilt for how, because I have my retics right here, you can see them crawling around, and I got what was, when I first came back into the hobby, did all the research I was doing and things I was learning was these industry standards. And which is where I went for. I was like, okay, you got to get an 8x3, and that's how everybody's keeping them. Right. And I don't feel as bad. I put ledges in there to try and make it better, but I want to. That's the reason that your video drew me in so much, is that I do want to. I have aspirations to open up into this room next door, and I don't own that space currently, but I'm planning to eventually own it when the person who lives there moves out, which I imagine will do eventually.
Especially if you cut a hole in their wall and put a reticulated python in there.
Yeah, that'll get it out real quick.
Any chance you mind this?
So that's my plan, is to eventually have some enclosure, because you've got some here. I want to pull up some pictures right now of some of your enclosures, and they're just beautiful.
Yeah, I love the bioactive setups that you have here for some of your animals. It looks
thank you.
Looks great.
Yeah, and for me, it is just a progression. Like there are people that have way better enclosures than I have, and when you start trying to add enrichment and lighting and whatnot, it does add up costs. So I've been very open with my viewers. Like I have more animals than I feel like I can care for properly, and I didn't really know that. Sort of like you, Brian, where it's like you get these animals and then you realize, oh, you followed industry standard, but there could be so much more. And now you have the animals, and now you kind of have to almost, work backwards. So I say to my viewers, as I have money and as I have time, I will slowly upgrade. So the pictures, I'm not sure which one you're looking at, but they are just that's over years of slowly progressing to what I hope to achieve is better welfare for the animal.
Yeah, I just love the live plants in there. And like you said, I'm sure the upkeep is, so how much time would you say, how much maintenance goes into these enclosures on a daily basis?
Not that much. I mean, as far as the I would say sometimes no maintenance on a day. Like the biggest maintenance would be changing waters. That's a few minutes a day type thing. But there's really, as far as, the gecko enclosures that are bioactive, there's really no cleaning. Like there's some spot cleaning and whatnot, but that is not taking up any time. And I have two boas, the one above my head. I'm not sure which pictures you're looking at. Those ones aren't bioactive, so I still clean them. And actually all three of my snakes, or all four of my snakes, are not bioactive. So they're still cleaning, like spot cleaning and whatnot. But when you have the live plants and lots of substrate and things along those lines, it doesn't require a full clean every time you do it, because there's bacteria in there that are breaking down some of the waste and whatnot. So it's nowhere near as bad management wise as someone might think.
Now with the bioactive, do you have to? I know, Matt, you're doing some experiments at
your
place.
I breed red-eye crocodile skinks, and for them, they require very little human interaction. The more stress you give them, that's what kills them. So I have all their setups set up bioactively, kind of like how you do. I have isopods set up in there, so they break down the waste. So all I need to do minimal is just go in and change the waters and give them fresh water bowls.
Yes, my question is, how do you ever change out the substrate completely, or is it just kind of a recycling process?
For the ones that are fully bioactive, you do not touch the substrate. The only thing you'll do eventually is add more. So eventually I'll add more as it starts to decompose and start to compact down. I'll add in some more, but you don't ever pull it out. Like you couldn't, because there's plants in it, right? There's roots systems in there, and there's a drainage system. So you really don't have to do much. The plants take care of a lot of that waste for you. And as well as like Matt was saying, the cleanup crew really does a lot as far as keeping things, clean.
It's pretty cool, man. I just love the way it looks. It when I look at things like that, it makes me walk in here and look and be like, man, this is sad. It makes me feel that I want to see like live plants and stuff. I put some air plants in there at one point, but the one
They crushed them probably.
they did they definitely crushed them. But I just and I don't want to downplay myself too much. I do take them out. They get lots of interaction when we're doing the educational shows. You know, they're getting out all the time. When it's nice out, which it just became not nice. Luckily, we're in a decent part of California where we can get pretty good temperatures most of the season. Where I take them outside, let them climb up in my oak trees and stuff, and they get lots of that. But I would. That's why I like what you're doing over there. I like the approach you're taking and the way the way that you present the information is not in a way it didn't make me feel bad watching it. Like it just felt like you were trying to just bring everybody up in the hobby to a better standard, which I assume is your goal.
Yeah, there's a few moments in my career of keeping animals that has led me down that path. The first thing is a few years ago before I started YouTube, I found this quote on, I think it was a forum. I have no idea who said it, so I've basically stolen at this point and paraphrased it. But the quote is basically, the better your care, the more the animal will reward you with their fascinating natural behaviors. And that really sunk into me because that's what we like to see. We like to see the animal behave as it would in the wild. Like, what would you rather do? Look at photos or watch Planet Earth, right? We want to see the animal do what it does. And so that's kind of that path I was taking. And then at one point I started asking myself, is it even ethical to be keeping these animals? Like you start to, I'm not sure. Have you ever asked yourself, do you ever get to that point where you're like, is this something that I should be doing?
Every time I get high in my snake room, basically, I go into that very introspective mode where I'm like, I start thinking a little bit more. And that's why I end up bringing them outside so much and let them crawl around outside so I can watch them, climb through the trees. And literally, I think every time that happens, I start thinking like, am I doing the right thing here? It happens.
Well, that's a big part of my podcast is trying to answer that question because, obviously having the animals in the wild, there's horrible things about being in the wild. Being in the wild is a tough place to live, but being in captivity means you've sacrificed your freedom, which is a significant sacrifice that we as animal keepers must justify. We just have to, because it's only fair to the creature we're keeping. So when I was kind of going through this a few years ago, I realized, I have this channel that's going to be talking about animals. What I could do is take some of the profits and donate it to a conservation charity, that's going to protect parts of the rainforest where these animals come from. And I kind of feel like that closes the ethical loop, right? So I found a great charity in Toronto. They have, sections of the Peruvian Amazon rainforest that they protect. And I reached out to them and said, hey, I have a channel that's focused on animal husbandry, captive animals, and I want to donate to your charity. So I feel like I can help protect the wild ones. The captive ones are already captive. The best thing I could do is improve their care, but the wild ones, hopefully we can keep their environment. So I had this whole great thing and I was super excited about it. And they emailed me back and they said, no, thanks.
Oh, really?
Wow.
I was watching your channel today and I came across that part where you mentioned about the Peruvian rainforest thing. They said, no, thanks.
Originally they said, no, thanks. And when have you ever heard a charity decline donations, right? It's like, what the hell?
Give you a reason why they said no thanks?
Yes, they did. And so they weren't declining donations. They were declining me publicly supporting them. And their issue with me was me being associated with the reptile trade, which was the light bulb moment for me. It was like, oh, we reptile people do not have a good image right now in the mainstream public. I have a bunch of people who follow me who absolutely love snakes, who would be super eager to, donate $5 or $10 here and there to help your charity, but you don't even want to associate with them because you see us as evil. And so in the end, I convinced them to let me. Now I'm a supporter of them. We've probably raised almost $1,000 between what I've raised, donated, as well as the viewers and whatnot, which is, I'm super proud of that. And my argument to them was, if I didn't have these animals in captivity, I wouldn't even consider donating to your charity, not because I'm evil, but because it wouldn't have crossed my mind. And so we started this relationship and so now we have, I'm on their website and whatnot as a supporter, which is great, but that really showed me what people see us as. So the question is, how do we repair that image? And because, I don't know what it's like in California, but in Canada, there's bylaws and all sorts of things that stop us from keeping animals. And
we have those that are happening. Like there's constant new laws that are trying to be passed to stop us from owning and, transporting these animals across state lines.
Exactly. It's like that scene in Star Wars where the walls are coming in.
Exactly.
And, it's like that's kind of what it's like. So what can we do as a community to stop that from happening? And as far as I could tell, the best thing was making sure that we're conserving the wild and then also improving the welfare of the animals that we keep. And there are other great things about the hobby as well. Like we have lots of involvement in science. It's one of the, you have kids, Ryan, so you know what it's like to get the kids to interact with the hobby. It's probably one of the best parts of, that's probably one of the best parts of the hobby. You can introduce people to animals. It also gives people purpose, right? That's a huge thing. If someone, there's tons of mental health issues in reptile hobby, and that allows people to have an outlet where they're, using their hands and working. So there's so many different great things about the hobby, but if people don't see that as a mainstream, from the mainstream side, then we can do better at sort of giving ourselves a better image, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It does make sense. And I know that the pushback you would get, I can already say, I was thinking about this today, like the pushback is going to come from the industry side. I'm sponsored by Freedom Breeder. There's an industry, and if you start attacking that side, then it's, or even suggesting other ways, then you're attacking somebody's money and somebody's way of feeding them their family. And that always is going to bring up pushback. I mean, we know that is the truth.
Yeah. And having a business that feeds your family is something that you should be proud of. It's not something that you want to tear someone down for doing. Although I guess you could find some businesses that are not savory, but I would never do that, to tear someone down. And as far as Freedom Breeder goes, like I watched that great clip that you did with them when they're going through their, Lindy was going through those old flyers, and as well as the video Garrett did, I think last year, where he kind of challenged them to do that arboreal or reinstate that arboreal challenge, or, arboreal rack. And Lindy is this innovative person where he had a rack system that you could include lights and a misting system and a drainage system and, heated perches and all these amazing things. But Garrett hit the nail on the head when he said the consumers didn't buy it. And if the consumers aren't buying it, then why would they do it? It doesn't make sense. At the end of the day, they're trying to feed their family. So that's what I hope to do with the podcast, is shift the consumer over to think like, hey, this is actually what we want. We want more space. We want to offer light to the animals, because that's so crucial. We're starting to learn so much more about reptiles. We know how important lighting is, and space and enrichment and problem solving, and all these animals are not dumb like we used to think they were. And as far as the racks go, the actual husbandry hasn't really changed in those, last 25 years or so, I think, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I don't think, what people are including, I know I watched on Emily's channel, she is putting in, she had them pretty decked out, even in the rack system. She had like all these plants and things going on. But yeah, I know they're working on it right now. They've been super busy and getting slammed. But and Garrett has a prototype of the production, and they've been working with their glass guy. I would love to see it work, and our big thing is definitely we would love to see it go, and for people to want to get them, so that they could justify making them.
Well, that's what I hope channels like myself and the few others that are kind of going down this path can do, is make people want to buy that. Because at the end of the day, we want, like I said, it's exciting to see the animals move and interact. So like that's what I was going to say with your reticulated pythons. Like, could you do an outdoor enclosure, or is there not enough space for that?
It's not a matter of space, more a matter of climate.
Okay, it's just not enough time of the year.
It would be.
It's too cold.
It gets too cold.
Yeah.
It wouldn't,
almost all the time.
Yeah, even in the summertime, it gets down pretty. Like I wouldn't be able to do something like, we went to Tom Crushfield's place, and he has this amazing retic enclosure. It's like, people give him crap because it's wire, but the snake's doing great in there. It's like a 16 by 8 foot by however high, with a huge pond that it can go and climb in, and it's a huge snake too. But that's Florida. He's able to, where he's at in Florida, he can do that outside. We wouldn't be able to pull that off here in California. I don't think anywhere in California, even Southern California.
Even today right here is what, 50s?
It was 27 this morning when I got there. So that's just.
Hey, you could tan with that.
Well, I'm not talking Celsius, my friend.
No, trust me, I know. We get real chilly here. But no, but it sort of gets to that point, is the exciting part is watching them behave like they would, and being outside is the easiest, because you don't have to worry about a bunch of, it's very expensive to build these large enclosures inside.
Right.
And that's the killer, right? We have, I think, and maybe you agree with it or maybe not, that in the hobby, we do have the tendency to promote collections that are just probably more than we need, right? It's so easy to buy new animals, and it's hard to, if you're going to try to do large enclosures, then you'll run out of space and money really quickly.
I'd say that's definitely a Western Western, I dare say American, but Western, the more is more
Yeah.
type of mentality, like collecting, more.
It's like collecting baseball cards. You gotta.
Yeah. So I came across this idea the other day that I think I'll do a video on. And have you ever heard the term the hedonic treadmill?
I've heard of hedonism. Is it the same
Yeah,
type of?
it doesn't, for some reason, it's not as evil sounding, but it sounds similar, but it's not as evil. Or maybe it is, it's just as pernicious. So essentially it's this tendency for our happiness to constantly return to a baseline, regardless of our external stimulus. And this is what I see is probably one of the worst things in the hobby that we do right now is you have this baseline happiness, you decide you want to get another animal, so you get that peak of excitement, you go buy the animal, and then after a couple months, you adjust to having that animal and you return to the baseline. And every time you do that, the only cure is to get another animal and get another animal and get another animal. And the fulfillment never actually gets there because you're constantly readjusting and adapting to your external circumstance.
Yeah, you're going back to something that you felt happiness in the past.
Yeah.
Like I felt this happiness before, so I'm gonna go back and essentially recreate it and make it happen again. That way I feel it all over again, and then just starts the whole cycle over and over.
Exactly. And I think it's a recipe for disaster. I do think that because one, we're dealing with lives, and two, people end up getting way more animals than they can possibly handle. And you often see that on Facebook, like, hey, I need to purge, 3/4 of my collection because I've just, collected way too many and I need to pay bills. I have kids, and that's not the message we want to promote. And that's part of, improving the welfare or improving the enclosure and adding natural enrichment into enclosure sort of helps solve that. Because when you add enrichment, the animals start behaving in a natural way, which is rewarding in itself. And so you're focusing on one animal, you're adding these extra climbing branches or whatever, halogen light, and then you see the animal interacting with it, and then you feel rewarded. And that can continue to go on because you get to watch the animal continuously do that. And that's one of the messages that I try to promote as well, is let's pull the reins back. It's so easy to, I think what Matt was saying, collect baseball cards. We could all do that, but you never satisfy yourself doing that. It's just the treadmill effect goes on forever.
See,
I think anyway.
I love the way that we brought this back to baseball cards, because being surrounded by this room, don't get me wrong. So you buy a baseball card, you usually put it into a box, you close it up, and you look at it every couple of times. It's kind of like the way we're keeping. I'm guilty of this as well. I have racks, like what Brian has here. I put hog noses into it, I close it, I kind of forget about it. With you having these bioactive setups, you could come in and you get to see that animal, that baseball card every single day, and you get to enjoy it and see it and essentially relive everything, like when you first got that card, when you first got that animal, and you first put it into his enclosure, how it it navigated the waterfall or the plants. By having animals in racks where you kind of shut the door and close it, it's very easy to be you forget that animal is a living creature and maybe wants to do more than just be in a box. But I'm guilty of as well. I have racks and hog noses. I also have crocodile skinks that are in bioactive setups, and I can see both sides to both arguments here. And
I almost got to the point where I was basically on the borderline. I could have gone one or either way. I have every animal that I've gotten, like the retics. That when I was first getting them, my plan was to breed them. That was the plan. That's why when I was I did the same thing. I hadn't, until a month and a half ago, I hadn't gotten a new snake for almost 2 years, which sounds crazy to somebody that's if to a lot of people that might sound crazy. It did sound crazy. We're like, what? 2 years? You haven't gotten a new snake? What are you doing over there? I was like,
don't you understand the hobby?
And it was because I'd kind of hit that point. Where it was like, I want to get this room next door, and I want to have a big thing, especially now that I'm not been able this year to go out and do the educational shows, which was the huge justification for myself and where I was currently at. Was I've got these animals, but I've got a purpose. I'm going out, I'm teaching kids about them every day, and as often as possible, and this is doing good in the world for the hobby, for people, for education, for these animals. And now when that stopped here, everything kind of got put on hold, but that's still my aspiration, is to build those enclosures and hopefully be inspirational in doing it, and do it in a way like you do, where I'm not like attacking people and be like, see, just because I turned over a new leaf, I'm not trying to tell everybody else that they're shit, you know?
Exactly. Well, and one of the things I always say on my podcast is the only difference between me having these enclosures behind me and having a rack system, like I was very close to breeding boas and focusing on boa morphs when I first got into boas. Like that was my plan. And I, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, live in a very small, isolated spot in Canada. Like we have a fairly small city, and Canada's a huge country. You know, most of the year you can't ship, through the mail. And I remember seeing another breeder in my area who had bred a litter of boas, and this litter of boas stayed on basically our equivalent of Craigslist for like months, like 8, 9, 10 months, constantly like trying to sell this litter of boas. And that's when I realized, like, what am I doing? I can't possibly breed boas just because I want to. Like I really, really wanted to. I wanted to go down that path, but there was no justification to add more lives into the realm that I was in if they weren't being sold, because I was going to have 25 boa babies to care for myself. So that forced me to sort of take a step back and kind of reanalyze what I was doing, and I think because I understand why somebody would want to breed and why somebody would want to focus on morphs, because I think one of the reasons we involve ourselves in the hobby is because we like to push our skills. Like it's fun to tinker with our hands. It's fun to problem solve. It's fun to learn these new things. And once you've mastered husbandry, the next logical step is trying to breed, because it's boring to care for them, right? It's like, what's the next hard thing I can do? That's when you get the excitement, is doing harder things, right? That advancing your skills. And that, I think, is one of the reasons people get into breeding, which is totally fine. But one of the messages I try to give is there are other ways to do that as well. And one of them would be just improving the enclosure, trying to go bigger, more natural. And that allows you to get that same sort of satisfaction without the ethical implications of bringing new lives into the world. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but if you don't go about it the right way, you end up with, Joe Schmo on Craigslist with 40 boa babies that you can't move.
That was one of the reasons I decided not to breed the retics, is when it was getting closer to it. I'd come across several incidences of people looking for retics and then seeing them a couple years later trying to get rid of them. And I was like, damn, that was only a couple years. Like, these guys live for a long time, and that's a big animal to try and just pass around and find a new home for. So, and it was a similar type of message that I would see people saying, like, oh, when I get into something, I go full bore. Like when I get into something like this, but I never, the question that I thought about recently, like in my mind, to ask somebody who says it next, is like, what was the last thing you got into full bore, and where are you at with that last thing? Yeah. You went full head, that type of a mentality going into it. Because you want to see people do well with the animals. You don't want to see us get that image like you had, where the conservancy doesn't want to work with you because of getting a negative image. We don't want that. We certainly don't want that. We want this to be something that is going to help people understand these animals, and even the people that like to keep them and enjoy their presence.
It's all about improving. That's my goal. I know that's your goal as well. I'm sure a lot of us would love to do that. It's just, I guess, sometimes when you get overwhelmed by the amount of animals, it becomes, you start to retract and be like, well, let's go back to making things as easy as possible, because now I don't want to spend all that extra time, all that extra money in making things bioactive. I mean, a lot of people don't know that those UV lights that you put on your animals, those have to be changed out, I think it's like every 6 months or so, because they start to lose the UV. The beam, yeah. They start to lose their UV spectrum.
Yeah, the output diminishes over usually 6 to 12 months, depending on the brand.
Exactly, yeah. And, a lot of people will be like, well, that's a $60, $70 light. If it still works, still on, I don't want to keep spending the money in doing that, because it does get expensive.
Mm-hmm. It does get expensive. And that's one of the messages I try to give as well, is this is not a cheap hobby. It can be a cheap hobby. You can make it a cheap hobby, but at the same time, if you want to just have one animal, you could really go to town spending a lot of money and improve the welfare of that animal exponentially by doing all those things. So to jump in with like a $20 snake and a $10 setup or a $50 setup, it can be deceiving to people, and that's where they create a bunch of they get a whole bunch of animals, and then if they try to do things like add UV, they get super overwhelmed, like you're saying.
Yeah.
But I will say I've never had anyone message me say, hey, I've upgraded some things, I've added some enrichment, and I'm disappointed about it. I've had hundreds of the opposite message.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Dillon, I had these sort of rack systems, and now I've added some enrichment to them, or I've added bigger enclosures. Or I've even dumped some of my collection to somebody who I know could care for it, so I could focus on 4 or 5 animals rather than like 10 or 12. And I'm enjoying the hobby again. It feels like a hobby. It doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like I'm walking into my snake room and having to change water bowls and bored doing it. I get that message weekly for sure.
We got a super chat pop in here from Jeremy over at Brassman Reptiles. Jeremy's the facility manager over at Nerd, and getting guys like that in there too. I mean, they've got a good outreach, and the way that we're going there. So, I don't know if I was supposed to say that or not. I'm going there like next month. I'm gonna go check out the place over there and see how they do everything. Kevin is just somebody that the way that he's worked with the animals, just really excited to see what it's like over there. To see some of their, I can never figure out how many rooms are at that place.
It's to see.
Yeah, it seems like a maze.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like they got these huge spots where they keep the venomous, and these huge enclosures for the some of the monitors over there that I've seen on video, and I can never figure out 10 rooms, 15 rooms, like what's going on over there. Finally, go check it out.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a lot of animals for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and the more people we can get on this conversation that you're trying to start. What are the names of the other? I know you've got like a kind of a crew of guys that are on a team, like 3 or 4 other channels out there. What are those? Do you mind shouting them out?
Yeah, there's a few. So, and most people are familiar with Reptiles, or I imagine most people are. That's Mariah Healy. She's got a massive website with care sheets and whatnot, and she has a little YouTube channel, but she's popped on the podcast a few times. Lori Torini, who some people will be familiar with. I'm not sure if you guys have heard. She's like a incredible animal behaviorist, and she's done some just ridiculous things with her snakes that nobody would have imagined even a year and a half, 2 years ago. She's training her snakes. They follow targets. They station. They do all sorts of things. So she's in there. Liam Sinclair of Reptiles and Research, he kind of does these sort of research-based videos where he'll read an academic paper and kind of break down the importance of UV or the importance of, or why we can use loose substrate. That's one of the the myths, especially on bearded dragons and leopard geckos, is people assume you can't use loose substrate. So, and then JTP Reptiles as well. That's Joseph Brabin. He does lots with lighting and heating and kind of goes into the physics of that. He's ridiculously smart. I think he's only 18 and way smarter than me. And if you want to really understand the importance of lighting and heating, definitely go check out his channel because he has some incredible stuff. And then there's a terrarium channel, which is a keeper out of the Netherlands. His name's Stefan. He's got a really large collection as well, and a beautiful sort of naturalistic enclosures, lots of turtles and some venomous as well. TC Houston, who is Reptile Mountain. Many people are familiar with TC Houston. He's a skink breeder, and he's kind of, I would say, spearheading the movement of breeders adding more enrichment into the breeding scenario, because that's one of the rubs, right? If you are a breeder, you have to watch your overhead, and that's where things get tricky. So he's starting to tinker with that. How can you effectively breed and still make money, but also add UV and add halogen lighting and things along those lines? And then Bryce Broom, who's the keeper out of South Africa. He's a venomous keeper as well. He helps me run the podcast. And I'm probably missing some people, but they're all have been on my podcast at some point in the past. So people, if they check out the podcast, they'll stumble across them.
It's a bigger crew than I thought it was.
There's probably like 8 of us, I think.
That's awesome, man.
It's good numbers.
Yeah, no, it excites me. It really does. You know what you're doing over there and what you guys are working towards. I'd love to join in.
We would love to have you. We would love to have like somebody who's actually breeding, starting to toy with these things, because that's the biggest piece. Is I understand the breeding side to it, but if we can get the breeders to start toying with those ideas, it starts showing keepers that it's possible. And I think that's one of the worries that breeders have, is like, if I add enrichment, I'm not going to be able to make money. But I think there's still ways to do it. And I've had people on the show that do it all the time, even have naturalistic enclosures and still breed, and it works out fine financially, and sometimes better because they have healthier offspring in the end. And so the more people we can get on this boat, the better. And like I said, keeping the hobby healthy and thriving is beneficial for everybody.
I know there's a guy that had a lot of success with breeding, not Antaresia, amethystine python. Oh, jeez.
Words, Brian.
Scrub
words.
pythons. Somalia.
It's called English.
I want to say his
Let
name
it
was
out.
Liam. But he had these beautiful setups for his scrub pythons, and he was successfully breeding. I think that actually helped him to have the success he did, was the way he had them set up in these very naturalistic type of.
Well,
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I kind of do.
Okay,
Kind of.
kind of.
No, you messed up a lot of words.
I did.
You lost me there. A few points.
sorry
I
about
tuned you
that.
out.
Are we still talking snakes?
No, I understand what you're saying though. But by having it, like, it helping him out. That's how I got successful with breeding crocodile skinks, is by having them on that bioactive setup where I don't need to go in there and physically mess with them. They can actually do what they would be doing in the wild.
And that was how because there's not many people that have bred croc skinks out there.
No, there's not.
But you think that it was.
In large part, it's just having it on a bioactive setup, having it in a large enclosure, and
So you have to mess with them less.
exactly. I mean, I don't want to take over the podcast here, but
Well, it's a good point. I mean, in this ironic sense, the species that are much more sensitive in the hobby are the ones that get the best care, because people realize, like, oh my God, I need to do everything I can to get that natural environment, because these things keep dying. Like, arboreal vipers is a good example. Like, or was it, I had someone on the podcast was talking about dwarf bitis, little tiny vipers in South Africa. And these things they are very sensitive, and you have to do your best at replicating that natural environments to not lose them. And I think the animals that become popular in our hobby are the ones that just, can handle anything. Like these animals have been on the planet for 200 million years. So the fact that they're still alive and breeding in the hobby is not necessarily a sign that they're thriving. It's just a sign that they're kind of doing what they've been doing for the last 200 million years, right? So quite often the durable, robust species are the ones that are subject to the least enriching care because of that.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Like, people who keep leopard geckos keep them in tubs too, and that's a very popular animal
Because they're very hardy.
They're very hardy, exactly.
Yeah, they can kind of go through anything.
Yeah.
And actually, I was talking to a keeper on my podcast named Francis Koskiri. He's just a private keeper in the UK. I think he's got like almost 200 animals, and he's had collection way over that as well at some point, like 300 animals. And every year there's a few clutches of eggs or whatever. I don't know if he ever he's not really focused on breeding now, but in the past he has. So he is anecdotal piece of evidence here. He has two rules with his snakes. One, they must be in an enclosure that's as long as their body. And two, every snake has UV. And in the 25 years he's been doing this, he's never had a snake get egg bound. So it's interesting. I mean, there'd be like hundreds of clutches, and he's never ran into that issue. So the question is why? It's anecdotal. We don't know why, but he suspects it might have something to do with extra movement and space, which would just yield more muscle development and more strength, which would allow the female to push out her eggs more successfully.
I've heard that actually before from a guy named Dan Crow. He used to breed hognoses as well, and he was saying that he would actually take his females out and put them into an exercise, like a 10-gallon tank with a bunch of branches and rocks and things like that, to actually get them to move around and build muscle strength, because they don't have anything by sitting in racks. But which is great and all, but if you talk to another breeder who has 100 snakes, can you imagine taking out every single female and sitting there and giving the snake an hour of exercise a day?
You'd run out of time. That's where a taller enclosure, a taller tub would be great, right? If you had a taller tub, a couple branches, let her climb, and she's going to get that muscle tone and muscle development, and you're not going to have to, take her for her daily walk.
Exactly. So, that's where I see, like, we need to start bridging the gap between how keeping things, as sterile or as, mainstream, with our rack system, but still, where we can put in those enrichments for them that they do need.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see the scientific community have more respect for the hobbyist side, because there's a huge disconnect there. I think I've lost I was really bummed that Herpeton didn't happen this year. This just happened to be the top of my my shirt pile this morning. I was like, oh, that's perfect. But that was such a great spot to meet. And I felt like that was the spot where it was going to be the merging a little bit more of the scientific community with the hobby side of the community. And That's why I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, because I feel like that's something that I really missed this year with Herbiton going forward. It may not happen again now that it didn't happen this year. It might just be, it might have just killed it in the water. And that was a big part of what I saw, being that merging of the worlds of the scientific community and the hobbyist community to work together to do what it is that are your goals that that drove me to try and get you on my channel in the first place.
Yeah, I know. I totally appreciate you filming those things at the Herpicon as well, because people like me who can't go or haven't gone get to watch these lectures and whatnot, which is, I think that was at Herpicon. You had some videos on Triple B, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and I totally agree. Like, as we can bridge those, the more we can bridge those two gaps, the better. And there is so much that the hobby can do that academics and science can't, due to money and time. Like, we in the hobby, we basically have unlimited money because we're willing to spend all of our money on this. We don't have to get approval from boards and all these different things. So we can, like, think about Corey Imart, right? Who's doing this croc breeding facility. He spent like, God, I think it was like 120 grand or something crazy like that. Mm-hmm. And he's going to be one of the first people to breed croc monitors. I don't know how many people have, but he's in the top 5 or something like that. This is an experiment that would not have happened at university, but the amount of knowledge that he's going to gain from that. And I guarantee you, he's going to have academics coming to him and having conversations with him and figure out how they can, put their heads together and do some research. So there is serious value with us doing this citizen science work, and places like Herpticon really do bridge those two together. And I the academics can be kind of snobby, right? And that's one of the things, is especially if they don't keep animals. If there's someone that's just a biology wildlife researcher who sees these animals in situ, and then they look down on us because they think that we don't respect the animals. But there are certainly many scientists in the community that are part of the hobby, and the more we can communicate with them, the better.
Yeah, there's a girl named, I've shouted out a couple times now, and I want to have her come on. Haley, she was a grad student here in Cal Poly. I got to meet with her and go out with them doing their research in the field, tracking rattlesnakes and getting the data from there. And I was very thankful for her because she was so open to this idea. Like, she's either has her PhD now and is working on her master's, something along those lines. She's a herpetologist, and she does phenomenal work. And one of the greatest things about her is she's open to having these, like, she came on the channel and she said that she got some backlash from some of her peers. Like, she's like, what do you, like, that's a breeder channel. Like, why are you going, like, why are you on there? Like, what are you doing? And but she still was open to it, and still is open to having that issue. She's got that understanding that, like you just explained, there's a lot of information that we're able to, without having to get approval from boards, that we find out as hobbyists that the scientific community could take advantage of if they just reach across the aisle, with her words. And I'd love to see that happen more and more, because it would just be great for all of us. I think it would be great for everything.
Well, we all would benefit from it, because the scientists would be able to give us, field information that we could use to help better care for our animals, better have success in breeding. And we can share, some of the information that we've gathered from owning the actual animals. We have contact with them in some cases almost 24 hours a day. We can share, some insights that we've learned about it. These scientists, maybe get some field study and get, an hour with the animal before they have to either pit tag it and let it go. And then all you have now is this, data whenever you can go back and hopefully find that animal again.
Well, there's this quote that I've took from the sports science world and turned it into a reptile hobby quote, because, and it's so true. It's the scientists discover what the hobbyists already know. And every time I've talked to a hobbyist or a scientist, they totally agree with that. It's like, yes, the hobbyists are the ones that are getting their hands dirty. They understand these animals. They figure out, take these two animals that no one can get to breed and, give them 3 years. And we know the recipe to make these two animals breed. But there's no science behind it. The science goes in and then they go find out the reason for it. They might come to the hobbyist and say, hey, this is why. And the hobbyist is like, yeah, we know that. We've been doing that for 3 years and it's been working for us. That's why we drop the temperatures, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And that's why it works that way, because the hobbyists have this passion that they can sink their teeth into, and they're eager to learn. So yeah, I think, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but
I think it's good to beat this horse, because to keep it going instead of just let it die. The horse is going to stop running, even if it's dead already. We need to.
It's been so
I took
Zombie
it
horse.
too far.
The horse is running but dead.
I
but
took
you
it way
beating
too far. I like the fact that you brought up sports science, because that's the thing about this hobby and people that are into reptiles. Sports is huge. Everybody loves sports. It's mainstream. The hobby, even though we have our nice circle here where we are all in this same group that we all adore reptiles and we like them, we are a minority. We're not sports. We're not football. We're not soccer. We could be gone like that. The current laws here that are trying to push against it's not a right, like you said on there. We could be snuffed out real quick. We don't have more people fighting for our corner. The public is not fighting for us.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, if you have a totally different keeping philosophy than me, if we were in a room of 1,000 people randomly plucked from society, we would find each other and have a great time talking reptiles. And that's the point, is that there is this common thread amongst all of us. Even if there's different philosophies there, we still want to be strong, create a strong and healthy hobby. And, I am a swim coach by trade. I swam for 18 years and I was a coach until COVID hit. And that's one of the reasons that I think my communication is maybe one of my stronger skills, because, if I give my swimmers a set or whatever, and they look at me with deer in the headlights and they don't get it, or they screw it up when they go and push off and do it, it's not my job to yell at them and tear a strip off them for not understanding. I have to go, I have to take 100% responsibility here. Something here went wrong with my explanation. I need to fix that and try again. And I think that's one of the issues we have in the hobby all the time, is if someone doesn't understand your point, you're immediately attacking them or calling them an idiot. And, you need to understand this because this is what I'm saying. It's like, well, if you are the person presenting the information, you are responsible for making sure the party that's listening understands it. And if they don't, it's your fault. And it's okay. Just try again.
I think that's a little too mature of you, Dillon. You're gonna have to dumb it down for me.
Here, you want me to explain it to you?
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, exactly. And that's what's gonna be your successful approach. Yeah, that's what's gonna make your approach successful is the approach you have right there. Your experience with trying to teach kids. That's what's gonna help you win.
I think we all need to become coaches in this hobby. I think that's the main focus. We need to teach everyone. We can't always assume that everyone knows, or that we know everything. That we can all be the coach. We can also be the student as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's hard to step down and say, I guess I'm wrong. It's not easy for a lot of people to often go the other way and be like, I'm not wrong. What do you mean I'm wrong?
Well, it's not easy to say that you're wrong, and it's also not easy to change what already is working for you. Like, keeping snakes and racks, that you've been successful and that's how it is, and I'm not going to change it. Why I lost my words.
Oh, good.
Well, especially if money is involved, right? If it is your business, if you're breeding snakes and you're making money that way, it can be very offensive to judge someone's form of making money. And I totally get that. And so, but at the same time, I look at a rack and I would say there's some better things that we could do now that we know these, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, we've learned some things about the animals that are just, the importance of near infrared light that you can't offer in a rack, and the importance of space. And like we were saying before, the fact that they actually learn and they're capable of complex problem solving and whatnot. The rack doesn't check all those boxes, which is okay, but we just need to know that and figure out, is there a way that we can still make this economical and incorporate some of those things that we now know are crucial to allow these animals to thrive. So you don't want to kick someone in the knees and call them an idiot for making money. And it's easy to understand why someone would be defensive when it is their livelihood or a part of their livelihood.
Well, I think if the selling point though would be if you could make it work in a way that you could keep it similarly, like cost-wise too, but yet, check those boxes that aren't being checked and have it work in favor by having stronger animals, having stronger stock, animals that live longer. I'd love to see somebody like Eugene Bissett put some of this stuff into work because of the amount of data that he collects over there, and put those data and put it into facts and science, and like this is working. This is our animals are living longer, they're producing better, and while checking all those boxes at the same time. That seems like it would be a great direction.
Yeah. And, I honestly think it's the smaller breeders that have the biggest opportunity because they are less focused on bottom line. If you're someone that casually breeds and you're like hoping to sort of, pay some bills or pay off the expense of the hobby. Those are the keepers that have the most opportunity. Those are the keepers that have those are the breeders that have the most opportunity to play around with what they're doing, because I do see it heading in that direction over the next 5 or 10 years. I think the consumers are going to start to want animals that come from a more enriched environment. I think they would, that's just the sense that I'm getting. I don't necessarily have my finger on the pulse exactly, but I just think that. And if that's the case, if the consumer is gravitating towards, a breeding operation that seems to have more enrichment, then that's what we want to catch up with.
I'm excited right now because I think I'm literally right there. That's where I'm at. I'm that person that you're talking about. I'm right in that position.
I'm already like in my mind right now thinking how I can redesign my tubs.
And I'm
well, let's do it. Like, honestly, I would love to be part of that process.
Well, another great thing why I'm even right there, like I work directly with Freedom Breeder. I can work something here. They're currently working on moving their snakes so they can focus more on the product side and making things, coming out with new products and making new things. So we could be right at the moment where that's going to start happening.
Mm-hmm.
Like
and I know space is one thing. Like, oh, did I freeze for a second? Oh, no.
Yeah, just
you're
for a second.
fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I know with the racks, space is an issue because you create the smaller tub and you can create more animals, which means more profit. So that's one hurdle to jump over, I think, is giving the animals more space. How do you do that? Maybe the animals have to be more expensive, but I think that's okay. And actually, part of me thinks, like, if we get the message of that hedonic treadmill that I talked about earlier, we're teaching people they don't need 50 different snakes. Maybe you teach people 10 snakes and they're willing to spend just as much as they would on the 50 snakes. Maybe it doesn't make a difference. I don't know. I don't want to go too far into the economics of it because you don't want to plan that far, but it's there's some problem solving that has to take place, but for sure there's opportunity here.
Well, I think that this has just been the beginning of a very long conversation and action. Not just a conversation, but a conversation that sparks action. And I'm very glad that I just decided to watch a video and was just like, I need to talk to this guy. I'm super happy that you were open to it because, like you said, it can go the other way. It could have been very easily even like, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm very thankful that you were open to having this conversation. I think the more and more we can do that, the better it's going to be for everybody in the long run and just be a good thing for everybody.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate coming on and having you invite me. And that is one of the dangers, especially now with COVID and everything, you can fall into those echo chambers really easy. So I tend to stay on that one side talking with those keepers, but it's good to come over here and, talk to someone who is breeding, who does have a rack system, and what can we do to, bridge those two parties and get out of an echo chamber, because that's the worst thing that happens on the internet. So I appreciate you inviting me on.
Yeah, man. Well, we're going to go into the after party here in a moment. But again, if you have anything you want to say to the audience before we move over to the private chat, if you would like to say it now's the time.
Well, first, thank you again for having me on. And if you do want any more information about myself or the podcast, just search Animals at Home. You'll find animalsathome.network.com is where you'll find all information on the podcast, or just search Animals at Home on YouTube and you'll find the YouTube channel, as well as the podcast is on the YouTube channel. And you can find me on Instagram at Animals at Home CA, and I answer all my DMs and everything there. So if you want to send me a message, I will get back to you.
Awesome.
Perfect. Right, I'll be sliding into your DMs here soon. So we'll chat.
Right on.
All right, man. We'll see you in a moment.
Awesome.
Well, I think that was great. What do you think, Matt? I already know what you think. That was awesome.
That was amazing.
Yeah, that was fantastic, man. I'm so glad that Dillon came on and that I reached out. That was great.
I loved it.
Like, yeah, that's fantastic. And the links are below. The link to his channel is below. So if you guys don't want to type anything, you can literally just go down and click, and you can be taken right there. It's down below. You just gotta scroll down, and there's the link. For ourselves, we're also diving into other things. There's something that's going to be announced on the vlog channel if you're not following the vlog channel already.
Check it out.
You gotta check it out, coming up next Monday. But man, this was way better than I could have hoped tonight. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. I never even spoken with Dillon before verbally, and that was, you guys literally witnessed it, and I think it's awesome. What do you think? Leave a comment below. Go check out Dillon's channel, and let's keep this conversation going. Man.
Let's keep it going, guys. It's much needed.
Much needed. Oh, the timing was almost perfect.
Almost.
Almost. All right, guys. time for this. No time. There was no time to prepare.
There is none.
There's no
just
time.
I have to go right off the cuff.
Okay. I mean, I usually do, but usually at least listen to the track a few times, not just go right. Okay. Country. Dillon said he hated country, but that he's really turned over a new leaf. So here we go on down the road, hoping to sing a song that sounds okay. Matt saved the day by coming in and fixing up our software, banging my head all day on the desk. Couldn't get a rest, didn't get a chance to hear this song, so I'm gonna do it anyway. Yeah, I'm gonna do it anyway. It's just for you, just for you. I wanna tell you who the next guest coming on is. Gonna be another G up from Kennedy. Yeah, he's gonna be a guy that talks to the computer to me. It's Adam Wickens. I gave it away, Matthew. All right, guys, I gave it away. It's gonna be Adam Wickens next week, so I hope to see you guys here. Thank you for tuning in to Triple B TV. Y'all take care now you're here. Bye. That work?
That works. That was awesome.
All right.
All right.